Our panel is Empirical Insights into Academic and Bar Exam Performance. And I welcome our panelists. To save some time and leave room for content, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves in turn, to state their names, institutions, and roles, and a brief summary of their research or project. And I'm going to use some first names today just to be a little bit more casual with everyone. I welcome first Jess. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Jess Finley. I'm with the University of Arizona College of Law, and I am a principal investigator with Chris Robertson and Kat Chang on JD-Next. As I'm sure many of you know, there are no specific prerequisites for law school, and lots of law students enter with different levels of, or different qualities of education and come from different backgrounds. Many students may feel that they are unfamiliar with the legal content, and they may feel that they aren't prepared for law school if they haven't had much exposure to legal writing and reading and legal analysis. And we see that this could potentially impact students from underrepresented backgrounds more from parents who haven't had the same college, maybe haven't gone to college or graduate school. And we know that this disproportionately impacts Black, Native American, and Hispanic populations. So JD-Next is a program that is intended to address the issue of students not feeling prepared when they enter law school. And the program is set up as a 10-week pre-JD course where students will gain exposure to the skills needed to law school to get it or to succeed in law school. And then we also include a test, which we hope will be a valid and reliable tool for succeeding or for making admissions decisions. So first, the course will start with core skills such as case briefing and legal analysis. We gradually release students to greater and greater responsibility as the course goes on, and they apply those doctrinal skills or those skills in the to doctrinal content. And then after they've completed the course, they will then take an exam. And this exam tests them on those skills that they should have been learning in the course. We've had some data from a 2019 cohort, which was positive. Our University of Arizona students who participated in the course, we found that they had higher grades than what would have been expected from their standardized test scores. And we also had a national sample, and across the national sample and our University of Arizona sample, we found that JD-Next exam comparably predicted success or comparably to the GRE. So thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from CJ and Derek.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm CJ Ryan. I'm an associate professor of law at the Roger Williams University School of Law, and I'm also an affiliated scholar at the American Bar Foundation. And my co-PI on this project is Derek Muller, and I'll let him introduce himself before I go into our spiel.
Oh, too kind. Derek Muller. I'm a professor of law at the University of Iowa College of Law. It's a privilege to be here today.
It is indeed a privilege to be here today, and Derek and I feel very fortunate to have the support of AccessLex in conducting our research, which investigates empirically which law schools overperform and even underperform on the bar exam over the most recent 6-year period, beginning in 2014 and ending in 2019. And we use a value-added methodology in our analysis. And this methodology, for those of you unfamiliar with value added, it predicts how an entering class of law students could be expected to perform on the bar exam. And it takes the difference of their actual performance on the bar exam, factoring in state pass rate thresholds, more or less. And that distance between the actual and predicted bar pass rate, in effect, is the value that the law school adds. So we have identified 25 overperforming law schools, as well as 17 ABA accredited law schools that were underperforming based on our methodology, with the balance falling somewhere in between. And that comprised the first phase of our research, was really identifying what schools over this period of time met those sort of standards based on the value-added methodology. In the second phase of our research, the phase in which we're presently engaged, we administered a survey to collect information about what types of reforms law schools are taking to ensure their students' success in the bar exam, in order to better understand how a law school's investment in these sort of reforms redounds to their student success. And we look forward to speaking more about our project with you over the course of this panel.
Thank you so much. John, you're next.
Hey folks, John Mayer. I'm the executive director of CALI, the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction. CALI is a nonprofit consortium of law schools. Almost everybody, I hope on this call is a member. And our project was to engage 7 folks from the academic success community. I'm going to name them. I wasn't going to name them, but I changed my mind at the last minute here. Stephen Foster from Oklahoma City University, Nicole Lefton from Hofstra, Courtney Hill from Syracuse, Laura Mott, City University of New York, Allie Robbins, also from CUNY, Renee Allen from St. John's, and Professor Melissa Hale from Loyola Chicago. Now, I wanted to name them because these are such awesome folks. What they did was they wrote 35 CALI lessons. And maybe a moment to explain a CALI lesson. A CALI lesson is not a video. It's not a collection of multiple choice questions. It's not flashcards. It's a guided, self-paced tutorial in which the students are presented with hypotheticals or some reading text, and then they are peppered, much like a Socratic dialogue, with multiple choice questions. The lesson may branch or loop based on the student's response, and they're scored not because we want to give them a quote-unquote grade, but because we want to motivate them to do well. So they wrote 35 lessons, and what was unusual about this for us was they weren't on doctrine subjects like contracts or constitutional law. They were rather about sort of the meta subjects of how to be a better law student. So the titles of the lessons had things like case briefing, IRAC, multiple choice question strategies. Actually, this is a great one. Multiple choice questions, wrong answer pathology. Thinking like a lawyer, metacognition, outlining basics, time management skills, attacking exams. I could go on. There's, like I said, 35 of them. Each one of them wrote their own lesson, but they also reviewed each other's lesson. So if there were ideas collectively in the group of 7, they shared them so that each lesson was as good as it could get. Also, we reviewed the lessons anonymously with our editorial board to give feedback. So these 35 lessons, the whole idea here is that students learn plenty about the law in law school, but they also are enculturated or brought to bear. They learn about a culture of law school and how to learn, but they often only pick this up through osmosis. And where they fail on these meta skills could hold them back from becoming successful students and ultimately, getting good grades or doing well on the bar exams. So these lessons were published throughout the year. This is only the first year that we've had them. But they were used over 30,000 times by over 7,000 law students. And that's a good number, by the way. That means students ran multiple lessons in this collection. You can see the lessons yourself at www.cali.org/success. They can be used as pre-law tutorials. So imagine making these available to people before they go to law school so they have a sense of what they're getting themselves into. They can be used at orientation or the first week of class. And perhaps most importantly, they could be used in remediation situations where a student is struggling, finds their local academic success person who says, well, I'm having trouble briefing a case. It's like, oh, we've got a lesson just for that.
So my next question that I had for each of you was, tell us how your research contributes, or John, in your case, the project you're involved with, to addressing the current bar licensing landscape. I'll just call it a landscape instead of issues because we know there's a lot going on. So, Jess, you want to take that to start with? Licensing, how does your research impact the back end of things?
Sure. So JD Next targets students prior to JD matriculation, which is earlier in the pipeline to taking the bar. So it doesn't, our program doesn't directly address the bar issues. However, we do believe the program will potentially address the issue in several ways. One, it will expose students to the law prior to going to law school so that they can assess whether it's really a good fit for them to go to law school. And two, it will help students learn foundational skills to be successful and confident in law school and in taking the bar. We are also hoping to get data in time to explore a link between JD Next and bar passage rates.
Terrific, terrific. CJ and Derek, how does your research contribute to the current landscape?
Well, I think one of the things that we look at when we're talking about the bar exam and legal education is oftentimes there's sort of an emphasis on the bottom line, on looking at sort of the pass rate. And that's important, obviously, from a student perspective. Am I going to be able to practice law? But it doesn't tell the whole picture about what's happening within a law school, right? Jurisdictions, despite the increase of the uniform bar exam, have different standards. They have different cut scores. There's different difficulties. And there's also controlling for the incoming classes and the predictors of the incoming students into a law school. So our effort is to try to look over a long period of time, several years, to look for consistency in performance and provide some sort of evening out based upon the performance, despite some of these disparities that we might see across time or across jurisdictions. And we look at multiple jurisdictions rather than just one per school, which some rankings might otherwise do. Additionally, and more importantly, I think, is that once we do this, we're not just throwing it out there to say, oh, here's schools that are doing really well in the bar exam, right? Our objective is to go figure out, well, what is it that these schools are doing that other schools aren't doing? Or is there some sort of best practices that we can develop, things that we think are more effective in helping identify those outperforming schools? And hopefully this will provide a model and a suite of options for schools looking at sort of best practices. It's not just what one school has done in one state, but something that sort of maybe many schools have done across a variety of jurisdictions that will hopefully enhance best practices going forward.
Wow, that's just awesome, just awesome. And I know that, John, some of what you talked about already, and if you could touch on this, your project as well spans the scope of the nation. How will it contribute to this current changing landscape with licensing?
Well, I hope that it's obvious that the better students are oriented to how law schools work or how law school works, then the better they do. And the sooner that happens, the earlier you catch them before they establish bad habits, the better. And computerized instruction is a sort of a low cost, low risk way to do that because it's available at any time that they want. They can run through the materials multiple times. They can run it on their phone or run it on their PC. And even better, the lessons, if a faculty member, in other words, not an academic support person, wants to use the lessons to sort of bolster their students' study skills, they can run them in the classroom using a tool that we call Lesson Live, where as the questions are asked, the students can answer them, the instructor can see the scores, and it's sort of like a poll anywhere tied into a Cali lesson. So we hope and expect that students who run these lessons will do better in law school because they'll have better study skills that that expert academic success people have put into these materials.
So each of the pieces that we're talking about is part of a continuum and a continuous loop that has an important end game. Jason Scott, if we could ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your research. And also, as you do that, please tell us how it's going to contribute to the current bar licensing issues.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties here on my end. So it's been a pleasure to be part of this panel with my esteemed colleagues here and to listen to the first panel. My name is Jason Scott, as the name at the bottom of the screen suggests. I'm a senior research methodologist at AccessLex, where I design, lead, and conduct research related to the bar exam and to bar success. I've been asked today to speak on a project that my team and I have recently wrapped that is a collaboration between AccessLex and LESI, the Law School Survey of Student Engagement.
Our research dove into looking at what factors influence law school academic success and bar passage. It used data from more than 4,500 students from 20 law schools across the nation. We examined admission indicators, the LSAT and undergraduate UGPA, as well as academic factors in law school GPA. And then we also dove into 19 student engagement factors that are captured on the Law School Survey of Student Engagement. The main takeaway from this is, and what we learned, is that although admission indicators are important, they're not determinative in any way of bar success. What impacts bar success the most happens in law school. A student's first semester performance is actually 3 times as predictive of bar success than either LSAT or UGPA, which indicates that first semester GPA can be a useful targeting tool for students most at risk of failing the bar exam, and therefore for remediation and intervention. We also found that GPA growth from first semester through graduation also predicts passage to a similar rate. And even modest increases can have substantial effects on the odds of passing the bar. For example, an increase from first semester to final of just a B- to a B can have can have a substantial impact on the odds of passing the bar, which just adds the fodder that further that what happens in law school matters. That it's not where students start, but it's how they finish. And the second question. I think this is particularly relevant for several reasons. First, in light of just the generally declining bar passage rates and MBE scores we've seen over the last 10 years. Even though we saw a bit of a hike in 2019, we still are at some historically low levels. And second, considering ABA Standard 316, which requires that dreaded 75% passage within 2 years. Adding to the difficulty is that there's been there's a good deal of research out there that finds that the number of students with the highest LSAT scores are attending law school at lower and lower rates. And that then, as a result, the median LSAT scores at many schools across the country have been on the decline. I hope that our research offers encouragement that although we have no explicit panacea, our paper is not going to say do this and you will find the Ark of the Covenant or anything like that. But that law schools do in fact make a difference. What you do makes a difference. So although we may be in some instances admitting students with lower LSAT scores, and that might present a challenge, LSAT scores are really weak indicators of bar success. And therefore, if we can somehow better target students both earlier and more efficiently, we can help mitigate that risk. Many schools already target students based on where they fall in the grade distribution. And some even do so right after the fall semester of the 1L year. And our findings support this approach. The first semester grades are predictive of bar success, and only a little less so than 1L grades. And this early targeting, right after that first semester, allows for even greater opportunity to work with those students to help remediate the skills that they need in order to pass the bar. But it doesn't mean that just after 1L or first semester that you stop targeting and you've got your group, but you constantly work to reevaluate where all of your students are. So students should be consistently tracked and targeted at each point in their law school careers. And the greatest bang for the buck is really targeting students based on where they fall in the grade distribution. Where the threshold exists is going to vary from school to school. It's not going to be the same for every school. For some schools, it's targeting students below the average GPA for a given period. For others, it's 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations below. In some instances, it's 1 standard deviation above. So that threshold changes, and that requires just some investigation at the school level. And it even varies from GPA to GPA. So for example, first semester versus final GPA. So it's important to find the right level for your school. But in the end, this should help maximize efficiency, and it should help spur academic growth and development.
Well, these are all so integrated in my mind, and each of these interventions has such important application. So on that theme, I'm going to ask a two-part question. Some of you have touched on the first part, but I'll mention both parts and see how you want to take this one. But the first one is, how will people in the legal academy, including, if you'd like, if it's applicable, students? We sometimes forget students in the loop, right? So how will people in the legal academy, including students, if applicable, use your research findings and or your project? And John, you mentioned this a little bit. And then the second part of the question is, how will you assess the reach or impact of your research or project? How will you assess its impact? So we'll go back in the same order. Jess, why don't you take it away first?
Yeah, so we are still in program development and scientific testing mode, but in the future, we can imagine a national rollout of JD Next that helps transform legal education. And we have 3 main goals. The first is to expose more people to law school and enrich the pipeline for underrepresented students. As John was talking about, we also envision that online is the way to go in order to do this. Having an online curriculum, it does all the things that John mentioned. It's low cost, it's accessible, students can have access to the materials at any time. They can watch the videos multiple times or on their own time. And we've been able to do this and still provide a lot of feedback to students by automating feedback when possible. Another thing that we've done to help provide additional feedback is using templates and rubrics for students to conduct their own self-evaluation of their success in the program. And we've also provided generalizable feedback to students using an instructor walkthrough on assignments, as well as providing model answers to students. We have another goal for JD Next, and that's to better prepare students for law school. And we are doing this through good scaffolding. So we start off really focusing on the core skills that students need to be successful in law school. And there's more, I'll call it hand-holding at the beginning, where students are relying more and more at the beginning on the instructors and the instruction in the course. And then that responsibility is gradually increased so that students, as they go through the course, are starting to do more and more work on their own. And then they start applying those skills to the doctrinal content in the course, and they gain greater confidence by structuring the course this way. We also want to continue to grow the course, and one way that we envision doing that is through peer feedback and incorporating that into JD Next. And the peer feedback can also provide students with a sense of community that is important for law students. And lastly, we want to have a valid and reliable and unbiased test for predicting likelihood of success in law school. And this links back to the second part of your question, and we are conducting research on that right now. In 2019, we rolled out a national randomized and blinded study, as well as a unrandomized U of A cohort. And we have results from there that we're still working on, but we see positive results that I mentioned earlier. And then in 2020, we partnered with 16 other law schools to offer JD Next curriculum to those students. And we are continuing to gather data, and we'll get more data coming up in spring 2021.
And just what you're doing with that extra data will help you determine if it's working, right? If it's actually helping students.
Yes, exactly. We have seen that for the U of A students, as I mentioned before, the students who participated in JD Next are outperforming what their standardized test scores indicate, and that's for our U of A cohort. And then we did see that the JD Next exam across both the national and the U of A students, that predicts law school success comparably to what the GRE does.
Excellent, excellent. All right, CJ, Derek, tell us how the Academy is going to use your findings and how you're assessing their efficacy.
Thanks, Sarah. So we're going to split this this sort of two-part query into both of us sort of answering your question. And just on the subject of how folks are going to use our research findings, the genesis of the project in which Derek and I are presently engaged was actually an article that I wrote using a similar methodology, a value-added methodology, for just 1 year, for the 2017 year, looking back to the class that started in 2014, predicting their bar success, and then seeing how they actually performed on the bar 3 years later. And I did so as a way to rank law schools based on the value they added to their students. That is, if the law school is sort of a black box, what does the law school do to increase or maybe even decrease the likelihood of success on the bar exam for a group of students? And that ranking methodology specifically had students in mind. I wanted students to be able to use those rankings as an additional data point to consider when evaluating their law school options prior to enrolling. That is, I think that data point is salient for many law students, particularly those sort of in the middle of the distribution, as it were, in terms of their entering credentials. So I think that particularly phase one of our project is very useful for students and their take-up. Now, for how law schools can use our research, because our methodology accounts for the students that a law school admits, indeed, it actually adjusts for their entering credentials, right? We're hopeful that law schools recognize the value they can add to the students they have now, not the students they wish they had or the students they had in the halcyon days a decade ago, right? So it's our hope that law schools not only see themselves as adding value to the students that they currently serve, but understanding one way of quantifiably measuring how they do so, as well as systematically looking at best approaches for serving those students and ensuring their success in the bar exam. And as graduate education goes, legal education is a hyper-competitive market, but it's our view that the enterprise of legal education is better when law schools can share their successful approaches to a core obligation of legal education, preparing students, right, for the successful careers that they'll embark on by successfully passing the bar exam. And additionally, perhaps most importantly, in the second phase of our research, we really seek to identify what's in the secret sauce. What are overperforming law schools doing to achieve their results of beating predictions consistently for their students' bar success? And we feel this information is vital for all law schools to be able to address the national issue of declining bar passage, which has already impacted the provision of legal education. And we expect that our project will take at least a couple years for its results to be realized in terms of the take-up among law schools. I'm sort of segging into Derek's side here, but we hope that our survey analysis produces a validation of sorts for the multiple avenues to ensuring student success on the bar exam. And I'll turn it over to Derek now.
Yeah, well, just briefly to add, I think, it will take some time, I think, to sort out this. And again, there's a lot of great research happening right now on this panel and elsewhere, and sort of trying to figure out how it all fits together of what's been done before and what sort of we're offering new, thinking about sort of the total suite of options. Our survey instrument, looking at what schools are doing, tries to look at a whole host of curricular and extracurricular options, a variety of ways that schools are identifying at-risk students, whether they're targeted or whether they're broad-based approaches. And so our hope is that this will first validate what a lot of schools are doing, encourage them to say, to the extent that they're overperforming, that these are sort of good things that are happening, and at the same time provide some options for schools that aren't sure or are wondering about sort of options to provide sort of a broad suite of things that could be implemented. And again, it'll be sort of on a per school basis to see how that is used in the future and how valuable people see it as a component of what they're going to add to or supplement what they're doing when it comes to bar success. But we're hopeful it's going to provide sort of a range of options that people can start considering and a starting point to consider, its usefulness.
John, you actually touched a little bit earlier on how people in the academy and academic success and doctrinal faculty as well as students will be using your lessons. How are you assessing their impact? How are you looking at the reach that you'll have with these lessons?
All kinds of ways. So we actually, so as students run through lessons, we gather statistics on how well they're doing. We don't share any personal information or scores that the students do. I want to reassure people that. But what we do get is all the questions that all the students who took a lesson, pardon me, got right or got wrong. And the value of that is we can go back to the author and say, so, here's a question that like 98% of the students got wrong. Was that your intent? In other words, are you trying to trip them up because that's a teaching methodology? Or is there something about the hypothetical or the question that could use some editing to make it more clear for the student to do better? Now, to be clear, our goal isn't that students run our lessons and get 100%. They're tutorials. They're not assessments. But there's an element of assessment that can be taken from their behavior in them. And the way that most comes to the fore for law faculty is that there's a way to create a link to a lesson. It's called a lesson link. I know, brilliant, right? And if the students follow that link to the lesson, then their score is visible to the faculty explicitly in aggregate, right? So if a faculty member or an academic success person wants to say to a cohort of students, go run this lesson on outlining basics because I want to see how you're doing, and they all run it, and he or she will get the scores back and can see which questions or which areas the students did very well on as a group or did very poorly on, and that becomes formative assessment back to the instructor. Oh, I better cover that better, or I better intervene or remediate with the student on that. We, of course, get usage data at the school level, and so what we can do is tell schools, well, this number of your students are registered at our website, and this number of them ran these lessons. If you think they should be running these lessons to help them in their studies, then this is how well you're succeeding in implementing that program. So the long and short of it is we don't know, we can't tell people, but we can give them the information that they can act on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that having been in the academic success community, I know, and I think many of you out there know, that in a lot of law schools, there's one person or two people or a small team of people helping the entire school and anyone who's at risk. And by being able to leverage these lessons, it seems to me that a school could have a geometrically greater impact on their ability to both formatively assess and then improve the skills of students. Jason, if you could, I think you touched also a little bit about the reach and impact of the LESI research that we're doing at AccessLex, but if you could talk a little bit about how we're going to look to assess that down the road and see whether it's really helping people, the information that we're finding, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think above all, my hope is that this research and the findings will embolden and encourage the legal academy to try new things. That is to innovate within their curricula, as well as their academic support and bar prep programs, and to then integrate some of what we've learned about student engagement factors and their relationship with bar passage. So specifically, identifying your programs or somehow measuring schools that provided additional supports to students that have, say, long commutes or dependency in care or are working full-time outside of the classroom. And then also to provide greater opportunity for students, either by fostering more relationships with the legal community outside of the law school, so that students have the ability to gain real-world legal experience, but outside of the classroom, outside of the law school, and outside of the academic kind of environment. And then I'm hoping that it serves to convince those that are reluctant to intervene after the first semester to not be so. That's a time to really use first semester performance not as a means to place undue weight or criticism on the students, or to have that student place that criticism upon themselves, but rather to use it as a performance metric to identify students most at risk, and then to work to further identify the roots of the academic difficulty, to foster skills enhancement, and to put students in a position to maximize their growth. And aside from those, one of the key metrics of research is, outside of promoting action, is the interest your research gins up and the additional research it spawns. And to that end, this is a kind of selfish plug, but we at AccessLex will be beginning a new iteration of this project that really dives more deeply into what affects GPA growth by tracking students over their law school careers and then matching LESI survey data all along the way. And we also hope to examine whether this law school GPA phenomenon that we uncover applies at the undergraduate level, and whether that can be applied then in some way to the law school admissions process. For that, we should have much more about the new initiative early next year.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for that insight. I think it's really interesting, and it's sparking a lot of thought for me today, that not only is the research of everyone in this community yielding findings that are important in and of itself, but they are spawning other research and provoking wonderful questions about where we should go next and what paths we should pursue intellectually and really curiously to try to better our legal education system and our world. On that note, I'm going to circle back to the whole panel for my final round, where I'd like to know what you each learned from your research. You're all incredibly expert. So what did your research spark in you, maybe about new questions, something that you think you might want to look at down the road? And while you're at it, the great two-part question, where do you see things in 2025 in the bar world, in the licensing world? So what did you learn, and where are we going to be in 2025? Jess?
I think my answer probably answers both of the questions. What I find very exciting is that it does seem like more exposure earlier on can really benefit students. So exposing them to the law and legal concepts. And one way that we do that at the University of Arizona is through our Bachelor's in Law program, which is an undergraduate degree program in the law. But I think I'd like to see in 2025 actually starting to target students earlier and expose them to the legal field. And I think that will help with professional identity formation and having them start envisioning themselves as lawyers and wanting to pursue the legal profession and developing those skills to do that and be successful and confident in doing it.
CJ and Derek, in whatever order you would like, we'd love to hear from both of you.
I guess I'll start and I'll let Derek close this out. So, so often we think about law schools in terms of their U.S. News ranking, which is not a great way of doing so. But, what our results reveal is that, yes, there are some reasons why some of the highest ranked law schools are some of the highest ranked law schools, but there are a lot of surprises. There are some law schools who, frankly, do not rank highly or are rank not provided schools that achieve and overachieve in terms of their bar predicted rates. And there's some schools in the middle of the U.S. News rankings distribution that wind up in the top 25. So all that to say, the heuristic of the U.S. News and World Report rankings is not a particularly helpful one, I think, in terms of understanding what is happening inside the black box of law schools. And that's something that was surprising to me and something that excited me about our findings. Now, where do I see the future of legal education and licensing and so forth? Now, I don't want to speak for Derek. Neither of us has a crystal ball, right? And as for legal education, I would expect to see law schools provide more, not less, curricular and extracurricular support for students to ensure their bar success. I think that's essential to law schools being able to be attractive to potential students, as well as to justify the public value of education, right? The public good that is legal education. With respect to bar exams, for better and for worse, I think that bar examination boards have sort of a gatekeeping mindset. And I'm hopeful that law schools as a collective can at least push back a little bit on bar examination boards in jurisdictions that have these unreasonably high cut scores, right? To sort of right size with national means as a way to ensure greater access to the profession as well as mobility within the profession.
Yeah, I think so far it came out, especially in some of the background reading for this project, that I was familiar with what a lot of academic success might look like. But I wasn't necessarily aware of sort of the suite of options that are available and the different approaches that schools have taken. And I'm really excited out of this project. Again, we're still in the collection phase, and I'm looking forward to finishing this up because I think my eyes are going to be open to see not only the diversity of approaches, but that maybe some things that were surprising to me in terms of targeting students who are in need or the kinds of programs that are the most successful. And hopefully coming out of this, I'm going to have some new things, new tools in my toolkit that I'm going to be supporting at our institution and other institutions to be approaching as a way of achieving student success. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I anticipate is going to be not just sort of a magic bullet, right, but a number of options that might be tailored to a particular institution to fit and help them in a given moment.
Before I ask you and put you on the spot about where we're going to be in 2025, because I'm not going to let you get out of that, I do want to just comment, because what you just said is priceless. I love this, that learning about the suite of options makes you want to go and support the people in your institution and other institutions who are in the trenches helping students and administer these initiatives and really do that hard work together. And that support from doctrinal faculty is priceless. It really resonates with the students. So that's just I love hearing that. So where do you think we're going to be? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to ask you to pretend you do.
Well, I think, the nice thing about our project is, we're trying to control the things we can control, which is, providing this information to schools and say, these are the things within your control. And when it comes to the bar exam, right, there's obviously a long-standing ongoing debate, and maybe there's going to be some change in the future. But usually when it comes to legal profession, let's face it, usually the better bet is that there's not going to be a whole lot of change in 5 years on that end. But at the same time, schools are adapting and doing what they can in the present moment. And they know to thrive in the present moment, given the students who come in, they want to provide them that success. And so hopefully that those are the things that are going to be at the ready and available for schools to be looking at. More change within schools than the bar, I would say.
Terrific. We have a lot to look forward to. John, what did you learn and what's in your crystal ball?
Oh boy. So the most important thing I learned was refamiliarizing myself with the academic support community. They're such an awesome group of people, so utterly dedicated to their goals of making life easier for law students. That would be the pitch that I would make. And they were a wonder to work with. And I also have to do a shout out to Deb Quintel, my director of curriculum development, who herds cats constantly, and brought this project, through to its completion. I do have a crystal ball, and here's what I think is going to happen in the next few years. So, in the last 9 months, 8,000 law faculty have plunked themselves in front of a video conferencing system and learned how to use it. And I think that's going to result in some skills learned that is to say the production of a lot more teaching videos. Now, my example for that is, so this Thanksgiving, I had to cook up squash pie for the first time. I had to fix a dryer. I had to do a half a dozen different things around the house. And each time I went to YouTube and typed in, how do I fix blah, or how do I make blah or something? And there was a video there for it. Now, you might be shaking your head saying, you can't teach the law with 3-minute videos. And I would say to you, that's a failure of imagination. You can create simulation videos. You can create, fake courtrooms or simulated client conversations. You could even do, if you know what Twitch is, you could even run a Cali lesson, with the author or with you videoing your thought processes while you answer the questions. And I tell you, students will watch those and consume those and will love it, because the generation wants a quick, boost or example to, show me how to do this sort of thing. So I'll finish up with my last prediction is 3 words: Zoom moot court, and automated law practice. Legal education is going to be full of dashboards and portfolios where students will track their work. They will demonstrate their competence with their papers, their blog posts, their essays, their multimedia. They're going to create video and or podcasts and or other presentation-like materials and social media that demonstrates their legal competence, because that's the way the courts are running these days as well.
Outstanding. Food for the imagination. Jason, if you could tell us a little bit about what you learned from the LESI research, and what do you predict for changes in legal education or licensing by the year 2025?
Well, I think CJ's actually brought up some really good points about looking into the black box. And I think what we've learned just in the first iteration of this project is that the black box is large and it's complex, a labyrinth, if you will. And it's going to take a lot to kind of disentangle the causal patterns and understand what leads to what. So I think that's the big thing that I've learned. But what I think the other thing is what I've said a couple of times is that, what law schools do does matter. And I think oftentimes that gets lost in when we just measure first-time bar pass rates. and say this school is good, this school is bad. That, in many regards, we're ignoring that black box. So I think our findings and what I learned really can be summed up into those 2 points. If I had to look into a crystal ball, which mine is, I must say, fractured, I suspect that there are going to be some changes to the delivery of instruction to mirror much of what's happened in the past 9 or so months as a reaction to COVID. I think there's going to be some level of permanence even as the threat of COVID wanes. So I recognize that not all instruction and coursework is conducive to a virtual environment. But for what is, there are some tremendous benefits both to schools and to students. And for schools, there's more flexibility in scheduling. There's less square footage occupied at any given time, so fewer headaches over room assignments. All of those things and more are just benefits that go to the school and helping to kind of cut down on some of the costs associated with the law school. In some cases, schools are still trying to figure out how best to do so. But for students, it gives more flexibility. It provides more flexibility to manage, especially for those that are managing, non-law school responsibilities. So if students live a ways away, they may have one less day that they need to commute. So Sarah's a storyteller, and she likes to tell how she used to travel many, many hours each week commuting to and from law school. Just one day where that's not necessary adds in a number of hours back to her day. And those hours, whether you have that commute or not, give you more flexibility to do other things, like maybe do pro bono legal work, or take on a position that it's a legal paid position, which, as I referenced earlier, we found are predictive of bar success. And it's just another avenue for students to gain exposure outside of academics, which I think help really prepare students for the bar exam, and even more importantly, for a legal career, to understand and know what is ahead of them in the profession.
Well, I have to say that I would be delighted to spend another 3 hours with this panel, because you all have so much to offer and so much to contribute. And unfortunately, we are at the end of our time for this panel. So I am going to encourage all of you to follow the research that's going on by these folks, and to look at the lessons and the programs that have been implemented so far, and to keep your eyes on these research and projects which will transform the landscape in the years to come. I am positive of that. And I thank you all so much for sharing your insights with us today. I am hopeful about the future listening to you. There are days when I wonder what we will have in 2025, but today I'm remaining confident that we will be somewhere good for law schools. And I'll just close this thought with what Jason said: what we do in legal education matters. It matters. So again, thank you.